So, on today's episode, I wanted to explore what has been a pretty hot topic for many different industries and for probably about a year. Will AI take my job? And I used to think about it in this kind of amorphous sort of way. What is going to be replaced with AI, what jobs will disappear, and what jobs will be created as a result. But I didn't think about how it applied directly to me until I had a couple of people ask within my training, so what do you think about that Microsoft speaker coach? And I thought, well, that's a built-in speaker coach into PowerPoint. And it provides a report on what people do well and what people do not do well. And then I started thinking, oh, will AI take my job? Maybe I should explore this a little bit. So that's what we're going to do today, along with one of my close colleagues, Maggie Miller, who is going to help us dive into GenAI and whether it could potentially take my job. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Karin Reed. I'm a four-time author, Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist, and communication expert on helping people to own the room, whether it be a physical one or a virtual one. Welcome to Speaker Dynamics. Glad to have you here, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, which is a little bit different. I wanted to give you some context for why this conversation is being had, and then invite Maggie Miller to give the voice of reason and also provide some expert analysis of where GenAI is relative to powerful presentations using this unique and ever-evolving new tool. So, as mentioned in the intro, I really was not taken aback, but realized that I needed to do a little bit more digging into these AI tools that can help people to become better presenters. And I looked at a bunch of different ones. The one that I decided to spend a little bit more time on was the Microsoft Speaker Coach. And what I found is that it does some things like pretty well, and things like picking up on filler words, and analyzing your pacing, discovering whether you're using enough pitch variations so that you can vocally highlight certain words for the audience to draw their ear to. I think that is of great value. Other things I think it does great is, it is certainly low stakes and low pressure. I mean, you can practice and get feedback in a setting that is private. And whenever you work with somebody like me or with one of my team or with any speaker coach, it's a little scary because you have to be vulnerable enough to allow yourself to be receiving constructive criticism, hopefully, that will allow you to grow in your speaking capabilities. And that can be a scary thing to do. It also is on demand. So I'm probably not going to be available to analyze your presentation at midnight. Depending upon where you are. If I'm teaching somebody who is in, Asia Pacific, maybe I will make an accommodation to adjust to time zones. But in general, you can go into PowerPoint and practice your presentation and get feedback at any time, anywhere, because it's built into the actual platform. It's also inexpensive. If you've got PowerPoint, you in general have Microsoft Speaker Coach. So it's going to be much less expensive than hiring someone like me or hiring any other speaker coach. And it also, what I find is super valuable, is it allows you to get more reps in. You can practice multiple times. And that is one of the things that is automatically going to increase your skill set. But there are some, what I would say, downsides to it. One of the things that I find is that the feedback that you often receive is a bit too boilerplate. There's no accommodation for nuance. So say, for example, it says you have great pacing. Well, sometimes that pacing may just be too steady and there's not enough variation. So there's steady tone that becomes white noise, and therefore the words kind of wash over the audience. It also, I feel like, doesn't do a good job in accommodating for different presentation styles. So one of the pieces that I use is to demonstrate the power of a pause. And this particular speaker does a pause that's like 8 seconds long, which works so well for this person because he's very theatrical. But if I had somebody else pause for 8 seconds, then the audience might think that they've forgotten what they were going to say, or, at worst, think that they're having a stroke. So the kind of Gen AI versions of speaker coaches don't give you that nuance, and they can't give that human perspective. They also don't understand the context of what you're presenting relative to the content itself, as well as the audience that you're presenting to, or even the environment in which you're presenting. Because, I've spent a lot of time speaking here about the nuances of communicating across different platforms. The way you present virtually to a camera is pretty small in terms of the conversation space that you're creating. And if I would go into oratory mode, that will seem very inappropriate and probably pretty fake. But if you try to stay small in a conversation space, if you were up on stage doing an in-person presentation to an audience of 1,000, you're probably not going to be able to have the impact that you want in a room that big. So there are variations based upon where you're presenting, who you're presenting to, and your presentation style that I just don't think that the Gen AI speaker coaches can actually detect. So I guess what I came down to from a conclusion standpoint was, I think my job is safe. But what I will say is, I think in general, Gen AI can get you about 75% of the way. But that extra 25% is usually what you use human intervention for. So I think that having these tools available is great. And I would encourage you to use them. But if you really want to maximize your impact as a presenter, that human perspective, I think, is still something that is very valid and hard to replace. All right, so I guess that's the justification rather for what I do. But I did want to learn more about where we are from a communication standpoint on this AI journey. And Maggie Miller, who is a member of my team, has been spending a lot of time researching that. So I asked her to come on the show once again to talk to us about where we are with Gen AI and how it's helping her to be as effective of a communicator as possible. Take a listen to this conversation. Maggie Miller, welcome back. Has it been like a year or so since we did this? I feel like it has been.
I was trying to think too. I think it's been a year, but let me tell you, so much has changed since we last talked.
Right. And that's why I was excited to have this conversation. We were, viewers and listeners, full disclosure, we were having coffee and she was saying, you would not believe all the different things that have been going on with generative AI and how it's impacted what you do. And I'm like, I feel like we should have another conversation about it, because the last time we talked, I remember you talked about how AI was, I think you called it your presentation sidekick, which I thought was a great way of phrasing it. And other people, by the way, have parroted that back to me. And you were saying that it can help you with like outlines, with ideas, even practicing delivery. You said a lot's changed. What's changed since our last conversation?
Yeah, lots has changed, but I will say that is still true. It is a fantastic sidekick for outlines and idea generation. But today I'm just using it for so much more. And I've really gone through this kind of mindset shift where I don't think of AI as a tool anymore. I think of it as a teammate. So it's part of how I think through presentations. It helps me refine narratives, anticipate tough questions, and tailor content for different audiences. Okay. So what I've actually been doing over the past, few months especially, is really building a bench of AI teammates or digital twins that are trained to think and work in a specific way and even actually work together.
Okay, this is like actually making my head spin. So for those of you who don't know what a digital twin is, Maggie, please explain.
Yeah. So a digital twin is like an AI-powered version of someone that you need input from. So it could be your boss, maybe a stakeholder, or even your future audience. So I build them in ChatGPT. So it's essentially a custom GPT, but there's other tools you can use. But instead of a task taker, it's a perspective simulator. So you can ask it things like, how would my boss respond to this pitch? Or what concerns would my audience raise here? This really just helps me stress test my messages before I'm in the room with that actual person. So, for example, I created a digital twin of you, Karin, to help me prep for this podcast. Yes.
Okay, that's really freaky and a little bit scary. What did my digital twin say you should think about when you come on to Speaker Dynamics Own the Room? And I'm going to brace myself for this.
Yeah, so I trained it all about your style and your framework. I call it the Karin Comms Coach now. I'm definitely going to be using it for many things now. But let me tell you a little bit about how it replied. It said that, Karin champions meeting equity, making sure all voices are heard, especially those in the room that might be quieter or remote voices. So it suggested adding something about how AI can help leaders anticipate who might feel left out of a conversation, or how digital twins can represent those perspectives. So I really thought that tied back into your kind of advocacy for inclusive communication.
I'm actually okay with that. If my digital twin is espousing that, I'm good. I think that is pretty good. Anything else that it was telling you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Me? The other one I thought was really interesting. There were several things. Okay. But I'll give you one more. It said that you often say structure sets you free, and you recommend an hour of prep for every minute of speaking. So since I was talking about digital twins as prep partners, it could connect back to that philosophy of how AI doesn't replace preparation, but really just supercharges it, which I thought was really so great idea. And actually some of the things that I was preparing to say anyway, but definitely tied back to like your philosophy.
Okay, that's actually really crazy. So it seeks those things out just on whatever is readily accessible across the internet. Is that how that works?
Absolutely. I actually did deep research on you to like build the custom GPT. So I asked it to go back about a year and look online, look at your LinkedIn account, because I know you share a lot of content there. I know you have a lot of blogs on your website. So I asked it to look at your website. I asked it to look at your podcasts, because you have a lot of those. And even kind of, people write about you, Karin. So what are other people saying about you? And so what it did was it built this kind of deep research that I was able to then upload into the GPT. And that's kind of the foundation of what I use to build your digital twin.
Okay, that's actually super cool. And I think of how limited my use is of GPT. Currently, Chat GPT, it's currently like puppy training guidance. But I could have been building a digital twin of a dog trainer who would be able to approach it with, similar philosophies as mine. So that's very interesting. All right. And that wasn't as scary. I do feel slightly laid bare by your deep research, but I guess like all in all, it's okay. I feel like if you were able to gain value from that and prepare better as a result, I'm fine with you doing the deep research on my stuff. But let's talk a little bit about, how this all fits together, because it sounds like rather than just like working faster, which seems to be like the big mantra for using any sort of AI, it sounds like it's helping you to work smarter. So let's kind of unpack that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like most of us, the first thing you thought of the value of generative AI was time savings. And I'm not going to lie, there's still a lot of time savings to it. But now I use it to help me see my blind spots. So it's not just about generating slides, or it's really about sharpening strategy. And when I ask the right prompts, AI can become a sounding board and not just a tool. So, for example, I've asked it to challenge my assumptions, like what's missing in a narrative that I've put in, or how would I improve an outline? So it really pushes me to think like a strategist and less like a slide builder.
Oh, I love that. That's so interesting. And, I know for some of my folks who I do, like, for example, media training with, they will use ChatGPT, provided that they don't include any sort of, proprietary information, to go through the questions that they may be asked and get practice in how they can navigate that, even just like what are the possible follow-up questions. Like it's really a great way to still kind of iterate on that. Okay, you mentioned training your GPT model. That does sound a little intimidating for somebody who might not be super tech savvy. So what does that actually mean, and why should someone do it? Why is this something that you consider to be really valuable?
Yeah, it definitely does sound technical, but it's actually really all about building context. So I'm definitely not someone who's technical. So if I can do it, I'm telling you, anyone can do it. It's all about getting your GPT to understand your voice, your values, and your way of thinking. So you're basically saying, hey, AI, here's how I speak, what I care about, and how I structure things. Now help me work smarter within that framework. Um, so why do I do it? Well, I do it because it's like hiring an assistant or a teammate who already knows your style. And the best part is they never go to sleep.
Yeah, that's very true. It is 24/7. And you can go back and, I continue to go back to things that I created and added on as I thought about additional questions, additional prompts. So it sounds like, the prompts that you're putting in though, create that context. And how deep do you need to be in those prompts that you create? Like, I always wonder about that. How specific should I get? Like, how much background information does it need in order to give you something on the other side that is worthwhile?
Yeah, I mean, I do think prompting is really key to using generative AI well. And I mean, I think about like being a journalist and what are the questions you would ask, as a journalist. Things that people sometimes forget to add when they're prompting is like, who's the core audience for what you're trying to do? That's one thing people miss. And, when you think about an audience, if you're delivering a presentation to a group of middle schoolers or to your executive leadership team, there's going to be a different way you tell the story. So audience is really key when you're thinking about it. But the more you can give it, I think the better the outputs are. But what I've noticed with training these GPT models is that I think because it starts to know you so well, and the more, of course, you work with it, the more it does know you. You can be a little bit lax on it because I do think it does start to understand you better.
Yeah, that machine learning is helpful. Still slightly scary, but very helpful. So let's give our listeners some practical ways that they can start using this. What do you suggest? Where do you get started?
Yeah, well, I would say create your the first one I would suggest creating is your digital twin, your personal GPT. And the first thing I would do is go to ChatGPT. Again, a lot of other tools have deep research as well, but do deep research on yourself. And this is where prompting is really important because you want to tell it to go out to the internet and essentially scrape the internet over a certain period of time and look for things about you. So think about where you might be sharing content that it would understand your voice, your tone, your style, your framework. So for example, like yourself, I use LinkedIn a lot too. So I asked it to like look at my LinkedIn posts and my profile, as well as blogs I've written. I ask it to look at podcasts like this that I do. And again, even you can comment and ask it to look at what others might be saying online. And then from that, it'll start to develop your tone and your style. Of course, when you get the deep research, read it over, make sure it is true to what you think you want your GPT to be. But I found that they're very, very close to what I would think my tone and style is. And then that document becomes the foundation for your knowledge base. Other tips for creating your knowledge base is like uploading blogs that you think are really true to your style and your framework. Maybe even a Myers-Briggs results test to tune it even further around your personality. Of course, as we've said earlier, don't upload any personal information, but there's a lot of information online that you can get that's out there anyway. But then really just get started, start asking it to summarize your presentations or write a thank you note in your tone of voice and give it feedback. Because the more feedback you give it, it will start producing drafts just like you.
Can I ask you like a very practical question? So you've created like this digital twin, like and I imagine like, when you, like, I'm just thinking from ChatGPT, I have my one, string that I've created and it's coming up with my voice. Do you stay on that same string when you ask questions like, can you write a thank you note to this person who invited me to speak at their luncheon? Like, do you stay in that same space or will it carry over if you create a new I don't even know what they're called, but like
Like
where
a
you,
chat. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I actually do have chats that I save around different topics that I know that I'm going to go back to. So if I'm working on content, but let's say I'm working on a blog, and I want to, even one of the things I do a lot with my GPTs is I'll call stuff in the knowledge base. Look at this information. I've done, I sometimes upload research that I've done and put it in the knowledge base and ask it, look at this research report and pull in the key findings that would make sense to include in this blog post or in this presentation. So you can call to the knowledge base, but then I save that chat. And then maybe I'll go back to it because from that blog post, maybe I want to write a social post, but I want to have all the context from the history of that chat to help write the social post that would go along with potentially the blog or the presentation. And so that's kind of how I do it. But yeah, I definitely like save my chats, go back to them from time to time when I'm building content, and I want the whole context to be part of it.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I'm feeling like I want to sit down with you side by side and just like see how you do stuff, Maggie, which is actually something that you can do because you created a wonderful workshop for us on using generative AI to create powerful presentations. So more on that a little bit later. But I did want to ask you something that is often a concern that I hear, and a concern that certainly I've read about, that people worry that we're going to lose our personal voice to AI, that it just kind of becomes a sanitized version of ourselves. What do you say to critics about that?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who is very in tune to their voice and what we do, Karin, that I was very skeptical of that as well. And I can see where people have concerns. But here's how I've seen it over my journey over the past few years and working with generative AI. And especially now that I've started to train my GPTs intentionally, what you're doing is actually preserving your voice. You're not losing it. So if you think about it, we've all had those days where we're just not 100%. Well, your digital twin is always 100%. So they can help you fill in those gaps on those days. And so I don't really necessarily see it as replacing your creativity. It's really about holding a mirror up to it. And you're still in control. AI might give you a first draft, but you really do still bring the heart, the nuance, and the story. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense and makes me feel more comfortable with the whole idea of it as well. What do you say to folks who are curious, but they're not sure how to even, get started using AI this way? What do you suggest?
Yeah, as I suggested earlier, start by creating your digital twin. Do the deep research. Find some really great content that represents who you are and start there. But remember, once you create your digital twin, it's not a one and done. You should update it regularly to make sure it stays true to who you are. We all change. Sometimes our professions and our careers change a little bit. And maybe the way you think about things are different in a year from now. So make sure you're always kind of updating that knowledge base.
So much has changed, as you've indicated in this conversation, of all the things that have changed, and really just your whole journey, figuring out how AI is impacting what you do, what I do, what everyone does. What's been the most surprising thing on this AI journey for you?
Well, I would like to give you two, because first is just how fast things have changed. It's almost hard to keep up with the pace. And I know in a few months, I'll be doing something even more advanced with my teammates. And that's kind of actually what surprises me and excites me about AI. And second is really my journey with AI has given me more time to reflect, because I'm spending less time on formatting and first drafts. It's not that I'm doing less work. It's that I'm doing better work. So I'm creating like faster drafts, deeper thinking, and clearer messaging. So AI really hasn't replaced my creativity. I think in some ways it's probably amplified it.
Yeah, that's actually reflecting something that Guy Kawasaki said on this podcast last year when he was talked about how he used GenAI to help him write his most recent book. And, he got some pushback from people who were like, that's not true. That's not authentic. But he's like, why is that not? It's just helping me to write a better book for all of you. And it's not taking over his voice. It's helping his voice to be as clear as possible. So, you are in the same camp as Guy Kawasaki, and that's a good camp to be in, Maggie.
Wow. Flattered about that.
So, I actually began this podcast by, asking the question of myself, will Gen AI take my job? Because I have had people who have been like, so what do you think about, the Microsoft presentation coach, et cetera, or speaker coach? And I was a little bit concerned, but curious at the same time. So I'd like your assessment, seeing that you are so close to Gen AI, especially in our field. Is it going to take my job?
I'm going to say no. I don't know if you've worked with generative AI much, but sometimes the outputs aren't great. It's still not at this fullest potential yet, but I still think at the end of the day, there's so much human nuance that we need in this world. And especially when you're dealing with people and especially training people on communications, imagine being trained by a robot. What kind of, communication are you really able to set as an example for that person? So I do think that there's still such a huge element of having a human and generative AI together to help people be their best selves, but I don't see it replacing you or me in the near future.
Okay, as we say that from very much a self-serving standpoint, but it's true. I mean, I do feel like you're spot on, and you're echoing what I believe as well. So, Maggie, this is really fascinating. The whole area that is being developed has been, lightning fast in terms of how it's progressed. And I'm glad that I have you on my team to be able to explain it to me and help our listeners and viewers understand it better as well. So thanks again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me again on this topic that I love to talk about.
Excellent. So earlier in this episode, I talked about how Maggie had created a workshop for us talking about how to use Gen AI to build powerful presentations. If your interest is piqued sufficiently, we have a way for you to get more information about it. So that is part of this week's bonus content. So if you go to speakerdynamics.com/bonus content, you will find an easily downloadable one-pager on this workshop, how Gen AI can help you to make powerful presentations. So if you want to check it out, maybe you want to peruse it, maybe you want to pass it along to your team, to your leaders and say, hey, this could be an interesting thing for us to do. You can go to speakerdynamics.com/bonus content, speakerdynamics.com/bonus content, and download it, and you can check it out. It's a really cool workshop that is very of the moment. So I would encourage you to take a look. I want to also thank you for listening to this episode and for continuing to find value in this human communication coach. Until next time, everybody.